Hello, everybody. Our next speaker needs little introduction. It is, of course, Mike Hawes, Chief Executive of the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. He's here to talk to us about the challenges we face in this time of political uncertainty and explain how he's putting the UK automotive industry's points ahead in the negotiations for Brexit. Mike, if you'd like to come up on stage. Hi, Mike. Nice to see you.
Thanks very much.
So if we get straight into it, is Brexit going to be an opportunity or a disaster for the motor industry?
I think it certainly presents challenges. Invariably, when you're looking at substantial change, it's a question of how you turn those challenges into opportunities. What we don't know is the exact nature of our future trading relationship with Europe, and thereafter what the opportunities are to trade more broadly or more easily with the rest of the world. I think as it is, we export to over 160 different countries at the moment. If you can reduce the costs or the barriers to trade, then it presents opportunities. The flip side is obviously if those barriers go up to Europe. So
we've also got the other great political issue, which is the election that's coming up. What do you think that's going to mean for car sales in the UK?
Obviously we have elections, we seem to having elections and referendum annually at the moment, but there's always that thought, well, okay, that's going to cause people to hold off. But there's another school of thought that says it doesn't really make much difference. I think people are more concerned about what happens to the economy. What really matters is consumer confidence. So rather than looking for specific policies in manifestos, you're really looking to say, okay, what will be the impact on whoever comes in on consumer confidence, availability of finance? Those sort of issues have a more fundamental impact on the market than just whether we think a political party is going to be in power or not.
Is there anything in the manifestos that you think would be really good for the industry, or anything that you think would be a disaster?
Well, the latter one is perhaps easier to answer. There is the Liberal Democrats have a line in their manifesto that says that they will effectively ban diesel engine passenger cars and vans by 2025. Now, whatever we think about the acceleration of alternative technologies, electric plug-ins and so forth, there is at the moment no ready substitute for diesel in commercial vehicles. 96% of commercial vehicles are powered by diesel. So the expectation that in the course of 8 years you'd totally substitute diesel for another form of propulsion with the necessary torque that you need to tow loads is a bit unrealistic. Looking more broadly, obviously there's not much that's specific in there about automotive. I go back to what I said earlier. It is about trying to make sure that political parties understand the importance of the automotive sector, both to the economy and to the operation of society, and ensuring that there's a strong economy and consumer confidence flowing through.
So I've got loads of questions, but do make sure that if you've got anything that you want to ask Mike, just raise your hand and one of the guys will just run over to you. So there's been a lot of stuff about clean air. We had the new clean air brief come out. Do you think that a scrappage scheme is still on the cards?
Probably not. I think we were always fairly reticent about the ability to deliver a scrappage scheme. Well, you always remember if you're trying to address air quality, and we do need to address air quality in some of our towns and cities, it needs to be targeted there. The government's published its proposals. It identifies 39 cities which have at least one road with an air quality problem in exceedance of the European limits, with at least one road. So clearly it's more effective and cost efficient to focus any activity on addressing that particular problem, whether it's one road or whether it's a concentrated area. You can do that through trying to encourage the traffic to move more freely, phasing traffic lights and so forth. That's more cost effective. I think the government's did some calculations, and to basically take the older diesels off the road, I think Euro 5 before Euro 5, in the specific areas across those different cities was going to cost 6 billion. Now, I think you can do much more and better things with 6 billion to address air quality than necessarily charging in a scrappage scheme. They're really, really expensive and quite a blunt instrument.
Is there any way that a scrappage scheme could be the boost that the industry needs at the moment?
Well, at the moment, look at the retail performance for the first 4 months of the year. It's an all-time high. I think maybe over the course of the year that we do expect it to decline to roughly around about 5%. So you've got to ask the question: do you want something to actually bolster a market which is at historical high levels? Whereas, what we're trying to do is trying to ensure that the market is stable and has that degree of sustainability in it. What we don't want is to have a peak exacerbated by, let's say, a scrappage scheme, and then when you go off the drug, it's cold turkey and the market collapses. That makes it much harder to plan.
What are your predictions for the rest of the year then?
In terms of the market, we think the market, as I said, the first 4 months is at an all-time high. Obviously, we came off a record of 2.69 million passenger cars last year, which beat the previous record from 2015. So this year, I know we do expect the market probably to go down about 5%. It is partly cyclical and partly that uncertainty that we just don't have. I think we are seeing, for the first time, prices going up for the first time in ages. We are seeing that's going across not just in the car market, but also across other consumer goods. It is now, in the last month or so, actually in exceedance of wage inflation. So the squeeze is beginning to happen. And that will take a while, but will flow through to people's propensity for major purchases. So, taking all that into consideration, despite being up the first 4 months, we expect the market to be down, I think, around 2.62 million, so about 5% down.
But still pretty good.
Still, in historical terms, this is an incredibly high level, and we must never forget that.
And we've also seen used cars doing fantastically well recently. What do you think that's down to?
Again, it's the flow through of a very strong new car market, which is given a lot of stock into the market. The residual values seem to be holding up reasonably well. Finance, for instance, is available now on second-hand vehicles, and that's a way of helping consumers get into vehicles they may not otherwise have had. But it is just that demand, and I suppose the other thing is, if you've bought a car 5 or 6 years ago, and you walk into a showroom now and look at the technology that you can find in a new car, it blows your mind. And that's really attractive, and how the importance people attach to technology, connectivity, the importance of that in their lives. They want that when they're on the move, whereas 5, 6, 7 years ago it was it just wasn't a consideration. So the introduction of new technology, both in new cars and nearly new cars the last 3 or 4 years, that's also an attraction to car buyers, but be they new or be they used car buyers.
There has been some stuff in the press about the PCP bubble being about to burst. We're not sure whether there's anything really to that. What do you think?
The FCA has announced it's not an investigation. It's not important to make the distinction. It's not an investigation. They're gathering evidence into the performance of the motor finance market. It's over 80% of new car sales now have some form of finance in there, usually PCPs, but the growth areas in private contract hire as well. There are concerns, invariably there's concerns at the edges that perhaps some of the finance deals that have been on offer haven't been sustainable, or the appropriate checks haven't been in place. Now, that's the accusation that's being investigated. I think we work with the Finance Leasing Association, which has all the finance companies involved, and certainly a lot of the franchise dealers with their captive finances. They're very alert to their responsibilities under both competition and compliance, informing consumers about both rights and responsibilities when you take out finance. And that includes, your mileage, it includes the amount you're going to pay, affordability tests. So we believe that, it is undoubtedly made the market more stable. It has also meant that many more people can purchase a new or nearly new car than otherwise could have done. The critical thing is, whenever you take out any sort of financial product, is to be aware of the terms and conditions, and that's where the emphasis has to be on the person providing that information and providing the finance to make clear to the consumer. But the consumer also, making sure that they understand, they're not just, so excited to be getting into a new car, that they understand that this is the terms and conditions. I mean, after all, if you're to take out a mortgage, you will make sure you understand whether you're on a fixed term, whether you're on a flexible rate, what is likely to happen to your annual payments on a monthly basis, the same as the next nearest major purchase, which is a new car.
Do you think that we could see any changes in the industry or best practices off the back of this?
I think it's too early to say. As I said, the FCA is it's gathering information. I think there may be, I wouldn't want to prejudge what that information gathering exercise is. I think, overall the market is, always remember when you're providing these finance packages, this is against an asset, and the asset is the car. And providing the consumer can maintain the payments, at least towards the end of the contract, the risk tends to sit with the manufacturer. And as long as the manufacturer has done the due diligence on the cost of the finance, the residual value, the market should be very sustainable.
We've got to talk about VED as well. Do you see that taking an effect on car sales in the remainder of the year, or is that it and things will settle down now?
I think we're, given the turbulence we've had over the last 2 months, whereas March was an all-time record, even going back to when we had just one number plate, just the August change, it was the biggest month ever. And you saw that in the numbers, that there was up about 50,000 units. So for everything we were saying then, that, be aware that this is consumers pulling, especially businesses, pulling forward new car purchases, and that April was going to be very, very tough. Sure enough, when it came to April and the market was down nigh on 20%, there was, people, basically doom-mongering, saying this is this is an absolute disaster. Well, April, which is generally about a quarter the size of March, was down about 20%, about 30,000 units. So you could see the parallel. But I think if you look over what happens now, so there was always going to be this very turbulent first 2 or 3 months to the year. We do expect it to settle down. I think the concern we have is specifically around vehicle technology like plug-in hybrids. They used to get a real advantageous treatment under the old VED. It is much less generous under the new change to VED. So one of the real attractions that would encourage people into these newer low-emission technologies has been removed. So that's going to cause some concern. The other issue is, for some people it's going to be slightly better off. For the majority, they will be paying more, especially in first year. The VED, it's a taxation to raise revenue, but it's also a very powerful tool to drive purchasing behaviour. And we still want to make sure it does that. It drives the purchasing behaviour in the right way, and that means to lower emission vehicles.
Do you think it's going to have an effect on the 40,000 mark, people having to pay more tax over that?
I think, invariably, for vehicles that are priced over 40,000, you do have to pay a premium. That part of the market is often quite resilient. Invariably, when you have a price adjustment, there's a short-term turbulence, and then the market settles down. And we'll see how quickly the market settles down, because if people still want, the growth, one of the growths of the last 10 years really has been in premium vehicles and more expensive vehicles. It's just how long it's going to take for the market to settle down and reach its new equilibrium. So it may be a little turbulent in the short term, but I would hope it would settle down. What we are concerned about, of course, is the message that the government, when it introduced it, that sends to UK manufacturers, because a lot of the cars we produce here are above that threshold, because we're very good at volume and premium manufacturing.
Interesting. So anybody in the floor who wants to ask a question?
Hello, Mike. Can you hear me? Robin Buxton from Jeffco. So, as you know, we're known for finished vehicle logistics, moving cars, particularly Citroens and Peugeots, from manufacturers to dealerships. Is there anything that you think that we could do more for dealerships to add value, to help them to sell more cars?
Oh, I'd probably suggest looking at the market. You're doing a bloody good job at the moment. Invariably, everyone is about reducing costs and maximising the margin. That is through, obviously, efficiencies. The introduction of technology invariably gives some people cause for concern. But the application of technology across the entire value chain, from manufacturing through digitization of manufacturing, through logistics and the way we operate in producing vehicles, and the distribution of the vehicles and the sale of those vehicles. Let's face it, the consumer's embracing the technology. We need to make sure the entire sector does likewise, because that's the expectations consumers will have, so it's the expectation all parts of the business will have. There is high capital costs associated with that when you make that first investment. But if it can demonstrate it's going to deliver value while adding quality, then it makes absolute sense throughout the entire the vertically integrated nature of the industry.
Anybody else whilst the mic's floating around? I'll crack on with mine. Oh, well, we've got two running.
Hi. Hello. Mike, there's a lot of talk about GDPR at the moment. Obviously, it comes into effect in May 2017. Do you think dealers and manufacturers are taking it as serious as they should be in terms of how they communicate with those customers moving forward? One example is you're going to need recent opt-ins. We all know that manufacturers and dealers historically have been poor at handling data, never mind communicating with them. How do you think they're going to get over such a big challenge of re-communicating with customers to get recent opt-ins to communicate with historical data moving forward? Because that's a real challenge.
No, it's a very good question, and I think this is one of the problems we face at the moment. There are so many issues out there at the moment, from Brexit to diesel, we talked about motor finance, potential changes to recalls, changes to MOT. The industry faces challenges on a number of levels. What you're talking about in terms of the data is an absolute one of them, which is right up there as well. It is, you have to make sure that your business complies with the legislation, otherwise you're not able to operate. And it's not just you as an entity. If you're part of a larger organization which may be operating internationally, we need to make sure the UK is seen as a safe haven for data, and this is all part of that, such that you can have that free flow of information across borders, whatever happens with Brexit. For companies, therefore, it is about understanding the requirements, as I suspect you well know, understanding the requirements of the directive, how it's going to impact the way they operate, the way they hold data, the type of data, and how they interact with the consumer and other stakeholders, because it's not just the consumer, to make sure that they have the appropriate measures in place. There are plenty of, and I'm sure there's plenty of organizations here today offering advice, and I think certainly the conversations I'm having with manufacturers doesn't suggest they're unaware. I think it's they're feeling a bit, this is just one of so many different challenges at the moment. How to put your full attention on all of them simultaneously is really quite difficult. But I think it's an excellent question, because it's an issue which perhaps not everyone fully understands yet, because it hasn't had that level of publicity compared to some of those other ones I've mentioned.
Anybody else? Don't be shy. Okay, I have plenty of questions to keep asking. So we've already seen an increase in electric vehicle sales. How do you think that's going to continue? Or?
Yeah, yes, it will. The question is just how rapidly. There's been a couple of reports, international reports, come out in the last week. One was from a professor in Yale or Harvard, I think it was, which basically said that from 2023, the internal combustion engine is over, and he's predicting Armageddon for the motor industry and even more so for the fuel industry. Now, I don't think we'd subscribe to that view, because there was another report from UBS which did a tear down of a Chevy Bolt, I think it is, in the States, and said that, all right, it's maybe loss-making at the moment, but within 6 to 7 years, it'll be on parity with internal combustion engines. I think, this is a very exciting time to be in the industry, but also a very challenging one. You are seeing that shift. More electric vehicles coming on the market, more plug-in vehicles, plug-in hybrids and so forth. But the exact pace of that shift is very uncertain because it doesn't just depend on the manufacturer putting the product on the market. The product's got to be affordable. It's got to deliver a parity in terms of performance. Now, we know electric vehicles have fantastic linear acceleration, but they need the range. And there's also, consumers like the convenience that if you're driving from Scotland to London, you just have to fill up halfway down or something. It's going to take you 5 minutes on your way again. When we're at the moment longer range, you still have to plan more about where you're going to recharge, what it's like. And so we do need more recharging infrastructure. The vehicles themselves have to come down in price, and the total cost of ownership equally has to be there, because at the moment the residual values still tend to be quite highly penalised. So it's about infrastructure, it's about cost, but the technology is there, but it still needs to improve to be the natural and realistic competitor to the mainstream of passenger cars, and then ultimately into other forms, commercial vehicles and so forth. It will take time.
We've already heard that there are a lot of dealers out there who are stockpiling petrols now to try and combat the issues with diesel, saying that people don't want diesels anymore. Is that a wise thing to do? Could petrol be next?
I think that the issue around diesel is clearly the sense or the uncertainty. A lot of stuff in the newspapers and other media, about diesel and what was going to happen with the government's proposals. What is important to note from the government's proposals on clean air? They're setting a framework for the country that says, in extremis, and there's probably going to be less than 10 cities that will have to introduce some form of charging. But that's in extremis. Look at all the other ways you can try and keep traffic moving. In extremis, and you have to introduce a charging element, you should exempt Euro 6 diesel, which has been around for nearly 2 years now, and Euro 4 petrol. So that, we need to make sure that consumers understand that no government is proposing to ban the latest diesels from towns and centres. So, with that, you can begin to try and address some of the fears people have. But also, it's about informing the consumer on the appropriate purchase, because if you are only going to drive around in a city, then, to be honest, your chances are your mileage is going to be 4,000 or 5,000 a year. It doesn't make sense to buy a diesel. It makes sense to buy a more efficient petrol or an electric vehicle. For most people, however, they have to do a mixture, and they're all doing longer mileage, and air quality is a local issue. So we need to inform the consumer better. And I don't, if we look at the sales, again, never draw too many conclusions from one particular month. Yes, diesel sales were down more than petrol in April, but perversely, the market share of diesel versus petrol went up in April. So there's always, it's one of those counterintuitive things, but it's the nature of the thing. So I think, whether I don't necessarily think you should be stockpiling petrol cars. I think it's about making sure that you're offering the right advice to the consumer over the type of driving they're doing. The internal combustion engine is here for many years. Diesel will be a mainstay of that for many more years. Certainly for the lifetime most people own a vehicle. And the residual values still seem to be holding up. So I think it's a question of informing the consumer so they make the right choice, and that's what the consumer wants, a choice of vehicles.
So if there's any questions from the audience, we can squeeze one more in. Okay, thank you, Mike, for that. That was great. Up next on our live stage is our independent dealer panel. Join us here at 10:30 to find out what they think of the industry at the moment.